And hello. The way we're going to deal with the responses will be more or less in alphabetical order. I'll go down the list, and everyone will have about 5 minutes to respond to the Winter Commission's report and/or Dick Nathan's other comments. Which were all very provocative. So I'm very happy that he was able to start us off that way, and I'm sure we'll hear more provocative statements from the panel, and then he'll get the next to last word, and then we'll have an opportunity for some more questions if time permits. So let me start with Dave Ammons from the University of Georgia. Dave, you could just use the microphone on the table, and we'll pass these mics back and forth and try to keep it informal.
Thank you. I'd like to congratulate the Commission on its work and fine product. I hope and expect it to contribute to the momentum that's needed to bring about meaningful reform. There are a couple of points that I wonder about. One specifically deals with the Commission's fourth recommendation. Let me read that recommendation to you very quickly. Recommendation number 4 is to flatten the bureaucracy by reducing the number of management layers between the top and bottom of agencies and thinning the ranks of the managers who remain. That sounds very good, and I'm inclined to be very favorable toward that recommendation. I only wonder about the foundation for that recommendation and the way it's framed. Specifically, there is, in terms of foundation, I'd feel better about it if there were some instances of successful layer reduction that were cited, or some clear substantiation. What the Commission says is that there is no magic number of layers between the top and bottom of government. And yet it goes on to say, we think this will work. I wonder if it would not be better if there were something a little less unequivocal, a little more in terms of encouraging units of government to analyze their situations with the objective of flattening and so forth. Professor Nathan said this morning that we talk a lot about what needs to be done, but we don't talk about how it should be done. And that's what I worry about here. I think about something that happened just a few years ago. An Atlanta TV station sent a reporter out with a mini-cam on an undercover assignment to follow city work crews around town. The same kind of strategy was followed in Oklahoma City with newspaper reporters and been followed in a lot of other places. The result was a very embarrassing expose and a general conclusion that there was an absence of supervision, that these work crews were not being supervised, and so their actual work product was remiss. It wasn't that there was too much supervision or that layers of supervision need to be removed. I wonder if that particular recommendation needs a little further fine-tuning. I support the notion and the desire, but I think it's one that should be very careful about to avoid having it blow up in our faces, so to speak. One other point that I wonder about a little bit is what appears to me to be an absence of consideration about the council manager form of local government. And I refer to a couple of places in here. One is a recommendation that mayors need the executive authority to select and deploy managers. A lot of mayors are not executive mayors. And I doubt that what was intended here was in any way a desire to undermine the council manager form, but this sort of statement could certainly be misinterpreted. Furthermore, in several instances here and also in the remarks this morning, the The desire is for strengthened leadership by political executives. Again, not all mayors are executive mayors. The contributions made by council manager structure in general and city managers in particular ought not to be overlooked.
Well, that was concise. Dick Bowers.
Thank you. I thoroughly enjoyed reading the Winter Commission report. It was one of those things you read in one sitting, well done, well written. I didn't pick up on that council manager thing, but I guess I got to think about that. But I did have some questions about the term executive, chief executive, and I guess I interpreted that as me in some cases and drew some comfort from that. A couple of comments that I'd like to make. I sat on a panel not too long ago, similar to this, to comment on the book Bankruptcy 1995. The author made a presentation, and the question I had then is the same question I have now. Do we have the guts to pull this off? I mentioned in my welcoming comments that political courage is considered by many to be an oxymoron. And I think we need to think about not just political courage, but administrative courage, and in fact, do the citizens of our cities and states and country have the courage to allow us to pull this off? Because special interest groups certainly have a great deal of power, and individual citizens, at least in our experience at the local level, find sacrifice at the neighborhood level for the good of all to be not a particularly easy thing to do. So I think courage is one of those factors that we need to consider individually and collectively as we look at this business of really changing government. And I believe as we sit here a few miles south of Sedona, the home of harmonic convergence, that perhaps we are fortunate at this time in the history of our government to have enough people pointing in the same direction to have sort of a philosophical harmonic convergence that will allow us to have meaningful dialogue on changing government and actually make a difference. When I served on Governor Hugh Carey's commission to reform the civil service system in the state of New York in the 70s, I was all charged up and a youthful public administrator who accomplished probably in retrospect very little, but thought we were doing something. And you know, we've gone through this cycle before. Frankly, after 25 years, I think this is different. I think we really have a chance to do something, but I do think it's going to take courage and sacrifice, and that hasn't been one of our strong points. A second comment I would have is to take issue perhaps with Richard's notation on TQM, perhaps to interpret it, if I might, and may well be wrong. But I think TQM has been a wonderful discussion and created many, many positive things, and has really been a positive force to discuss quality in the city of Scottsdale and to work hard to create an environment within which the individual makes a choice to produce the service that that person produces for the citizens of Scottsdale a little bit better, a little more sensitive, a little more within the context of that person's issues every day than they did the day before. At the other end is the abuse of TQM and the failure of TQM, and the bad marks that it gets is when the process triumphs over the product. Again, something we find easy in government to fall into. But I believe that the quality movement, when it comes down to a value-based effort to create within the individual the choice to make a difference, has been of enormous value and will continue to be. I have just 4 little tabs that I'll point out in the report that I'd like to just draw your attention to. One I mentioned earlier, our political system is a reflection of our individual values and priorities. I believe as we look at operationalizing some of the principles in the Winter Report, that we need to pay particular attention to the values, to the culture that Richard mentioned of government and reshape that as we reshape policies and procedures.